This video is sponsored by TinyBuild Games. Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're taking a look at Cartel Tycoon, a new sim and management game with unique survival elements that puts you in charge of your own drug cartel, dealing with all the associated challenges from laundering money to keeping your subordinates in line, all while expanding and developing your operations. You might have seen me cover this game a few times on the channel already, but just this past week, Cartel Tycoon went from early access to a full version 1.0 release, and it's got some massive updates and changes to go with it. It's a whole year's worth of updates, including 8 particularly big ones since that first early access release. It's of course better balanced now, and naturally it's received a ton of polish to get to its final state as well. If you like what you see in today's video, you can use the link in the description and pinned comment down below to learn more about the game and pick it up at a 30% discount between now and August 2nd. Now, with timestamps down below and no more time to waste, let's dive on in and take a look at Cartel Tycoon. The core gameplay. At its very heart, Cartel Tycoon is a management and simulation game that uses its themes and setting as a way to stand out and inform gameplay mechanics. If you're worried that the game is tongue-in-cheek or otherwise goofy, you can set those concerns aside. It's a game about a very specific type of organized crime that involves resource management, production chains, profit generation, and staff management all the same. There are 2 story-driven campaigns and a tutorial that should last you around 20 to 30 hours altogether, but beyond that are the sandbox and survival modes that keep the game alive for infinitely longer than that. Sandbox mode is about a fresh experience every time you start a new game, and survival mode is an extremely challenging approach to the game for those who've gotten comfortable with it. As the name Cartel Tycoon implies, you're going to be in charge of your own drug cartel set in a fictional country under the circumstances that reflect the real-world 80s. You play as the capo of your organization, and you'll need to hire and manage people under you to help grow your business into an empire, spreading your influence from city to city and region to region. Characters all have their own special abilities that they can use to expand your business, raise funds, or protect against other cartels and the police alike, and they'll all want the opportunity for personal growth and glory as well, seeking promotions and raises, acquiring more skills for you to exploit as they do so, but you'll need to keep in mind that they'll of course expect to get paid more, and paid on time. Should things go sideways and you're not able to make payments, you can expect loyalty to drop, and when it all hits the fan, you won't be getting resignation letters from your employees. This is where the survival aspect of the game comes into play. Failing to operate your business smoothly will eventually result in your literal demise, eliminating your highest ranked and most skilled character. Your capo. But it's not game over. You'll be able to choose one of your lower ranked employees to take their place instead, taking over the business and continuing operations. Again, this taps into the cutthroat nature of the business. Now, to get everybody paid, you need to make money, and making money involves selling product, but to sell product, you need to make product. Farms will provide ingredients for processing while your warehouses and trucks ship raw materials and finished products from place to place, with more complex products requiring more steps to get from start to finish. There's a decent variety of end products, and each has its own requirements for soil and farming, processing after the harvest, and delivery, with each having different monetary values as well depending on how much they're selling for. But since you're dealing with illicit products, you can't just openly sell them. You instead need to pack your goods into other legitimate products. Fruits and vegetables from farms, TVs and game consoles and radios from factories, and countless other legitimate goods to hide your goods need to be brought to a central location alongside your illicit goods so they can be packed together and shipped. Shipping is also something you might want to take more control over. Seaports, river piers, and road checkpoints are great spots to export from, but it doesn't hurt to have your own airfields constructed as well, especially as your empire grows and you need to be more effective with your throughput. And control over exactly where export happens is never a bad thing either, rather than being at the whims of the nation's existing infrastructure. Already you can see just how many moving parts there are in the core gameplay loop, but that's not all. Money earned at your export locations is considered dirty money, and while you can use that for some expenses, most of your upkeep costs need to be paid in clean money, so it needs to be laundered. For this, you need to manage legitimate businesses at cities where you bring the dirty money and launder it. Moving dirty money around can draw the attention of the authorities though, and if you have to travel through territory you don't control with money in hand, you'll have to pay people off to let you through, eating into your profits, introducing yet another additional mechanic. Acquiring territory involves convincing politicians to work with you, and that means completing side missions and providing a substantial, let's call it, financial incentive to get things going. But expanding your territory doesn't just give you more freedom of movement. It also gives you access to more space for legitimate businesses that launder your dirty money, as well as more territory to build on, sometimes cutting travel time down as you can now build roads in more convenient paths, or as you can place aerodromes in more convenient locations. So there you have it, the core gameplay loop. Build buildings to acquire raw materials, build buildings to process raw materials into finished products, build buildings to hide said finished products inside other finished products, build roads to connect it all together, hire people to help expand your empire, ship goods to export locations, make sales, bring the money back to legitimate businesses, launder money, make your payments, try not to get caught, and try not to get killed. All that while there's a running narrative or perhaps a larger scale sandbox game going on. And if that somehow doesn't sound deep and involved enough for you already, hang tight because there's a lot more to talk about. War and diplomacy. Running a cartel has a lot of similarities to your typical high-profit business. There are negotiations, there are disagreements, there's internal affairs, there's investigation by the authorities, and there are hostile takeovers. There's just a little more blood and powder involved when it's the business of drugs. Enemy gangs were a bit of a nothing entity in older versions of the game. They'd drive around and cause you trouble from time to time, and typically it was more about you having to displace them in order to expand into new regions and to take over new cities to again grow your operations. Much like some of the other major updates we're going to be talking about, enemy gangs have been completely revamped for the version 1.0 release and now have their own leaders with whom you can speak, trade, and do business. You can acquire their territory through diplomacy, or, of course, you can stick with the old wartime ways, sending your lieutenants to forcefully acquire buildings, cities, and the territory on which they stand, facing off against enemy lieutenants, pitting your power levels and skills against each other. Ousting a gang will anger others, or cause some of them to fear you, so it's all a fine balancing act as you progress through the game. Enemy gangs think nothing of you at first when you're just the new kid on the block, but eventually they might realize you need dealing with. In the sandbox mode, you can actually tweak enemy gang aggression levels, but the base game will push back against you should you try expanding too aggressively into enemy territory, and you can actually expect a bit of a challenge if you grow too far too fast. Beyond fighting with enemy gangs, you'll also go toe-to-toe with the occasional politician, as I described previously, to acquire control over cities and more territories, but perhaps more threateningly, you'll have to go toe-to-toe with the authorities. As you get involved in more nefarious activities, you'll start to draw heat, attention from law enforcement at various levels as you cause terror among the population. Crossing certain thresholds of terror will cause various entities to get involved. The local police might start seizing and shutting down buildings, preventing their use until you pay a sizable bribe. The federales might block off key routes, so on and so forth, right up until the CIA starts attempting assassinations on your lieutenants, and there are military strikes by the US military. You can always reduce terror levels by simply laying low for a bit. It naturally decays over time, and if you've managed to acquire the highest level of loyalty from the people, your terror level will drop even faster as you avoid clashes, avoid getting caught, and perhaps take more care when you move goods. Keep pushing your luck, however, and soon you'll be involved in shootouts with the cops, military units, and more besides, resulting in a rather rocky road to success if you even make it there. Special buildings. When I last played Cartel Tycoon, the special buildings littered across the map were still very much work in progress, and in almost all cases, they weren't really implemented yet either. With the version 1.0 release of the game, this is no longer the case, of course, and these special buildings are all operational, bringing some very interesting new mechanics with them. The prison, the guerrilla base, the indigenous territory, the military base, and the airport alike all need you to build a relationship with the people in charge of each respective special building before you're able to reap the rewards of said building. The first step to building this relationship involves having a conversation with the person in charge and fulfilling 3 mini-objectives to appease them. I call them mini-objectives, but they'll take a decent bit of effort, and at times, they might even be counterintuitive to regular gameplay. For example, getting friendly with the military base requires you to increase your terror level as a first step. a move that will draw the attention of the authorities and potentially cause you more trouble sooner than you'd otherwise hoped for. Getting buddy-buddy with the local airport means, just as your first mini objective alone, you have to build tourist attractions like amusement parks and salsa clubs, expenses that you might not be able to take on at the time, but hey, you gotta spend money to make money. Naturally, with these investments come some solid rewards. The airport, for example, is much like a higher-level aerodrome that you might choose to build, except you don't have to worry about the hefty upkeep costs, and you get access to a massive storage space that can move goods with some solid consistency to bring back significant sums of cash more often. The prison is a very interesting one as well. Any of your lieutenants that get caught in a shootout or when otherwise breaking the law get sent to the prison, where you can either pay to have them released or otherwise taken care of if they've been causing you trouble. You can also recruit new lieutenants straight out of the prison if you find one that you like who's been tossed in there for some reason or another. The Guerrilla Camp acts as a free aerodrome with a large storage capacity and a larger than usual carry capacity per shipment too, though it does take longer for each shipment to go through. That means you stand to make more money each time a plane leaves with goods, but the plane tends to leave less often than from an airport or an aerodrome that you might own, so those wads of cash, as big as they might be, come a little slower. Apart from that though, the guerrillas will actually start joining you in your wars if you're close friends. You have no control over where they go and when, and sometimes they'll decide to take a break from fighting to recuperate, but if you know when to time your battles, you'll have their support against enemy gangs and the authorities alike, often tipping the balance greatly in your favor as a result. Working with the chiefs of the indigenous territory, meanwhile, will give you access to a place where you can purchase both legal and illegal goods, some of which are uniquely available through the indigenous territory, and meanwhile, upsetting the chief instead will cause you trouble, limiting your expansion by blocking any construction opportunities within indigenous territory. Finally, after becoming friendly with the general at the military base, you simply need to provide the base with a constant supply of opium. As you supply more and more, you'll gain access to certain upgrades in the technology tree that make your buildings better defended against attacks as you start to use military technology. After that, you'll see buffs to the combat capabilities of your lieutenants when they stay at the base for a bit, and finally, full-on immunity from National Army actions that would otherwise start causing you trouble if you were drawing too much attention from the authorities. Now, on the mention of the tech tree though, let's take a moment to discuss the intricate tech tree. The tech tree in the final build of the game is absolutely massive and integral to your success right from the start. As you progress through the game, whether it's in a campaign, during a sandbox game, or in survival mode, you'll need to tap into the tech tree to unlock more advanced options and modifiers to options you already have access to. There are 3 tiers of technologies that you can unlock as you progress through the tree, and while most options can be unlocked at Tier 1, some aspects like the food factories, chemical plants, drying racks, and labs are only available in Tier 2, and then Tier 3 is really about fine-tuning and upgrading your capabilities. This means you start with access only to opium farms and plantations as far as illicit substances are concerned, with cannabis, dried cannabis, and cocaine being made available in Tier 2, and with meth and heroin being available at Tier 3, with heroin actually being a completely new addition to the game with this 1.0 release, requiring significantly more complex processes. Naturally, you can't just rely on the drug production buildings alone. You'll have to research, unlock, and build other buildings that give you access to the various crops, chemicals, and again, processes needed to actually produce those illicit goods too, and they're suitably locked behind research and upgrades as well. Now, apart from unlocking new products at existing buildings, upgrades include elements like larger effective ranges for buildings, faster production, larger storage limits, reduced upkeep costs, as well as additional connections you can make to automate movement between buildings, and you'll also be gaining access to higher tiers of infrastructure to make for faster movement from point to point too. The upgraded versions of buildings are, interestingly enough, not always the best option. You really have to keep an eye on where your goods are actually moving through, since higher tier buildings are able to produce, store, or move more product, sure, but they also cost significantly more in upkeep costs. So there's a nice bit of management and strategy going on over here that you actually have to consider where and when to upgrade and just how much to upgrade. Higher tier buildings are not always the best solution. Sometimes low productivity areas need to be kept at lower tiers. Now, this goes for buildings you've constructed as well as national infrastructure that you've invested in, like river piers. The final point of interest with the tech tree is with regards to connections to the military base. As you can see, some techs are locked behind your relations with the military, compelling you to initiate a partnership with a local general, supplying them with goods to improve the relationship and then gain access to a special improvement for pretty much all of your key buildings, upgrading their power, increasing their ability to hold their ground when attacked by outside forces. So the tech tree goes well beyond spending just time and money to directly access new technology. It actually draws you into side missions and objectives elsewhere if you find yourself in need of that extra bit of support. And as you approach the late game and the bullets start flying between your cartel, rival gangs, and the authorities alike, chances are you'll want to make that extra investment. And an extra investment is clearly what the developers have put into Cartel Tycoon as this 1.0 release happens. I'm really just scratching the surface on all the improvements made to the game through early access. Logistics works differently, new residence buildings have been introduced, your characters will be involved in all sorts of events now. There's so much going on, and if you've played the game or seen it played in early access, so many parts of what you've already seen will now feel completely new. And if this is your first time hearing about the game, there's a lot more to explore. I haven't spilled all the beans here. If you want to learn more or grab the game for yourself, don't hesitate to use the link in the description and pinned comment down below. Again, just as a reminder, it's on a massive sale right now with a 30% discount between now and August 2nd. Now, of course, if you enjoy strategy gaming, sim gaming, or management gaming, don't hesitate to subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to hit that like button. If you have any questions or thoughts of your own, feel free to share them in the comments down below. And of course, as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.